know how deeply you, the entire nation, and I think I may say the whole world, sympathize with me in the irreparable loss we've all suffered.
Just 1 minute ago, King Charles dropped a bombshell that has left the entire world in shock. The true story of Queen Elizabeth's final 24 hours has been exposed, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. What happened behind closed doors at Balmoral Castle will make you cry. From her final words that no one expected, to the desperate race against time that failed, to the secret that the royal family has been hiding from the public. The final chapter of Queen Elizabeth II's remarkable 70-year reign began long before that September day in 2022, when the world said goodbye to Britain's longest-serving monarch. To truly understand the significance of her passing, we need to look back at the months and years leading up to that moment, when age, illness, and personal loss began to take their toll on a woman who had dedicated her entire adult life to serving her country. By early 2022, it had become increasingly clear that the Queen's health was declining. At 95 years old, she had already lived longer than most people could ever hope to. But her advanced age was beginning to show, in ways that even the most carefully managed royal appearances couldn't hide. The palace had been quietly scaling back her public engagements for some time, though they were careful not to alarm the public with too many details about her condition. In February 2022, the Queen faced what many considered her most serious health challenge yet when she tested positive for COVID-19. Despite being fully vaccinated and having received booster shots, her age placed her firmly in the high-risk category for severe complications. The news sent waves of concern throughout Britain and the Commonwealth realms, with millions of people holding their breath as they waited for updates on her condition. Fortunately, the Queen experienced only mild symptoms during her bout with the virus, but the incident served as a stark reminder of her vulnerability. The royal palace responded by further reducing her public duties, allowing her to focus on what they diplomatically termed lighter responsibilities, from the safety of Windsor Castle. However, even these adjustments couldn't address all the challenges she was facing behind palace doors. The Queen's physical health wasn't the only burden she was carrying during this period. The emotional weight of losing her husband of 73 years had been devastating in ways that the public could only begin to imagine. Prince Philip had passed away in April 2021 at the age of 99, leaving Elizabeth to navigate the final years of her reign without the constant companion who had been by her side through 7 decades of marriage. Those close to the royal family reported that the Queen's grief was profound and lasting. While she continued to fulfill her duties with the same dedication that had defined her entire reign, it was clear to those who knew her well that she was carrying on with a heavy heart. Many royal biographers and historians have since suggested that her sorrow played a significant role in her physical decline, with some even proposing that her death was partly the result of what could only be described as a broken heart. This theory becomes even more touching when you consider the arrangements that were made for their final resting places. Prince Philip's coffin had initially been placed in the royal vault beneath St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, but it was always understood that this would be temporary. After the Queen's death, his remains were moved to the King George VI Memorial Chapel, where he now rests beside his beloved wife. It's as if the Queen had always planned for this final journey together, ensuring that even in death, they would remain side by side just as they had been throughout their extraordinary lives together. Despite the personal toll of grief and declining health, Queen Elizabeth II remained remarkably committed to her constitutional duties. Her sense of responsibility to the crown and to her subjects seemed to provide her with strength, even when her body was beginning to fail her. After Prince Philip's death, she could have easily stepped back from many of her obligations, but instead, she chose to carry on, viewing her role as something larger than her personal comfort or convenience. However, as 2022 progressed, the physical limitations became impossible to ignore or work around. In March of that year, for the first time in 60 years, the Queen was unable to attend the state opening of Parliament due to what the palace described as mobility issues. This was only the 3rd time in her entire 70-year reign that she had missed this crucial ceremonial event, with the previous two occasions being during her pregnancies with Prince Andrew in 1959 and Prince Edward in 1963. The significance of this absence wasn't lost on constitutional experts or the general public. The state opening of Parliament is one of the most important ceremonies in the British political calendar, and the Queen's presence has been a constant for generations of politicians and citizens. When Prince Charles stepped in to deliver the Queen's speech in her place, it marked a poignant shift in the monarchy and served as a clear signal that the transition to a new reign was already beginning, even if no one wanted to acknowledge it openly. What makes the Queen's final months even more remarkable is how she continued to fulfill her most essential constitutional duties right up until the very end. Just 2 days before her death on September 6, 2022, she carried out one of her most significant responsibilities as head of state by formally dismissing Prime Minister Boris Johnson and appointing Liz Truss as his successor. This ceremony, traditionally held at Buckingham Palace, took place instead at Balmoral Castle in Scotland, reflecting the Queen's need to adapt to her physical limitations while still maintaining the constitutional requirements of her role. According to Truss's later accounts of their meeting, the Queen appeared sharp and fully engaged during their conversation, though she was using a walking stick to move around. Some of those closest to the Queen have suggested that completing this final constitutional act gave her a sense of peace and closure, as if she felt she had fulfilled her duties and could finally allow herself to rest. The decision to spend her final months at Balmoral Castle in Scotland wasn't accidental. This had been her beloved retreat for decades, a place where she could escape the formalities of court life and simply be herself. She had arrived at Balmoral on July 21, 2022, and many royal experts believe this move was motivated by the wealth of cherished memories the property held for her. Despite her declining health, reports from those final weeks suggest that the Queen was enjoying herself as much as her condition would allow, maintaining many of her usual routines and finding joy in simple pleasures. The events of September 8, 2022, began like any other day at Balmoral Castle, with no immediate indication that it would become one of the most significant dates in modern British history. The Queen had settled into a comfortable routine during her extended stay at her Scottish retreat, and those around her had grown accustomed to managing her daily needs while respecting her desire to maintain as much normalcy as possible in her final months. The previous evening had been particularly pleasant for the Queen, who had enjoyed what would unknowingly become her final dinner. Those present during that last meal later described her as being in good spirits, sharing laughter, and even cracking jokes with the staff and family members around her. There was nothing in her demeanor or physical condition that suggested the dramatic turn her health would take in the hours that followed. This sudden shift from apparent wellness to critical illness would shock not only those closest to her, but eventually the entire world. By the early hours of September 8th, however, everything had changed. Sometime around midnight, the Queen's condition began to deteriorate rapidly and dramatically. Her caregivers, who had been monitoring her closely throughout her stay at Balmoral, recognized immediately that this was far more serious than any of the minor health concerns they had been managing in recent weeks. They acted swiftly, transferring her to a medical station within the castle, where a team of the country's top doctors could monitor her more closely and provide whatever treatment might be possible. The medical team worked tirelessly to understand what was happening and to stabilize the Queen's condition. But despite their expertise and best efforts, they could not reverse her decline. Her vital signs began showing alarming changes, and most concerning of all, her blood oxygen levels started to drop significantly. For medical professionals, this was a clear indication that the Queen's body was beginning to fail in ways that could not be easily corrected, no matter what interventions they attempted. As the morning progressed, it became increasingly clear to both the medical team and the royal family that the situation was grave. Queen Elizabeth II, who had reigned for 7 decades and had become a symbol of stability and continuity for multiple generations, was now fighting for her life. The realization that Britain's longest reigning monarch might not survive the day began to settle in among those at Balmoral, even as they continued to hope for some kind of miracle, Meanwhile, in London, the day was proceeding normally for most people, including newly appointed Prime Minister Liz Truss, who was deeply engaged in parliamentary debates about the ongoing energy crisis facing the country. The House of Commons was buzzing with the usual political discussions and arguments, with no one outside of a very small circle aware of the drama unfolding hundreds of miles away in Scotland. At precisely noon, everything changed when Truss was discreetly handed a note while she was speaking in the chamber. The contents of that simple piece of paper would soon send ripples through not just the British government, but the entire nation and Commonwealth. Recognizing the gravity of what she had just learned, Truss quickly excused herself from the debate, leaving both fellow politicians and members of the public who were watching the proceedings completely puzzled about what could possibly have prompted such an abrupt departure. The mystery surrounding Truss's sudden exit from such an important debate lasted only about 20 minutes. At 12:32 p.m., Buckingham Palace released a carefully worded statement that would immediately capture the attention of news organizations around the world. The statement announced that the Queen's doctors were concerned for Her Majesty's health and that she was comfortable and resting at Balmoral. While the palace tried to strike a reassuring tone by mentioning that she was comfortable, the very fact that such a statement was being issued at all was deeply alarming to those who understood royal protocol. The timing and wording of the palace statement, combined with Truss's unexplained departure from Parliament, created an immediate sense of foreboding among the British public. People who had been following the Queen's health challenges in recent months suddenly found themselves fearing the worst. The phrase "doctors are concerned" carried particular weight, as the royal family typically maintained strict privacy about health matters unless the situation was truly serious. Labour's deputy leader Angela Rayner also received a similar note during the parliamentary session, which only heightened the sense of unease spreading through the political establishment. When multiple senior political figures are simultaneously pulled away from important government business, it sends a clear signal that something extraordinary is happening, even if the general public doesn't yet know what it is. As news of the Queen's condition began to spread beyond the immediate political circles, Liz Truss took to social media in an attempt to provide some reassurance to an increasingly worried public. However, her carefully chosen words did little to calm the growing anxiety, as most people could read between the lines and understand that the monarchy was facing what could be its most critical moment in living memory. The gravity of the situation became even more apparent as royal family members began receiving urgent calls to travel to Balmoral immediately. In royal protocol, such urgent summons typically only occur in the most serious circumstances, and the fact that family members were being asked to drop everything and rush to Scotland spoke volumes about how dire the Queen's condition had become. Prince Charles, who was already in Scotland with Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, was among the first to reach Balmoral. Rather than making the journey by car, which would have taken considerably longer, they opted for a helicopter from Dumfries House, demonstrating the urgency of the situation. Princess Anne, who was also already in Scotland, was able to reach the castle without delay, ensuring that some of the Queen's closest family members could be by her side as her condition continued to worsen. As word spread that senior royals were rushing to Balmoral, the British public began to understand that this was far more than just another routine health scare. The sight of multiple family members traveling urgently to Scotland sent an unmistakable message that something truly serious was happening. For many people, this was the moment when the possibility of losing their queen shifted from an abstract future concern to a very real and immediate fear. Outside Buckingham Palace, crowds began to gather spontaneously as news of the Queen's condition spread through social media and news outlets. Although they couldn't physically be at Balmoral Castle with the royal family, the Queen's loyal subjects did what they could to show their support and concern. People brought flowers, lit candles, and many simply stood in quiet prayer, hoping that their collective goodwill might somehow give the Queen the strength to pull through this crisis. The crowd outside the palace grew steadily throughout the afternoon, with people of all ages and backgrounds coming together in a display of unity that transcended normal social boundaries. Some in the gathering seemed to instinctively understand the gravity of what was happening, while others clung to hope that this would turn out to be just another health scare that the Queen would overcome, as she had so many challenges throughout her long life. Even as heavy rain began to fall over London, the vigil continued. The weather seemed to mirror the somber mood of the nation, but it couldn't drive away the devoted subjects who felt compelled to maintain their watch outside the palace gates. They stood together in the rain, holding on to hope, while bracing themselves for news that no one wanted to hear, but that many were beginning to expect. Despite the prayers and well-wishes from thousands of devoted subjects gathered outside Buckingham Palace and the tireless efforts of the medical team at Balmoral Castle, Queen Elizabeth II's condition continued its irreversible decline throughout the afternoon of September 8th. Her doctors worked with increasing desperation to find any possible intervention that might stabilize her vital signs. But the reality was becoming undeniably clear to everyone present that they were witnessing the final hours of Britain's longest reigning monarch. By around 3:00 p.m., hope was rapidly fading as the Queen's vital signs showed no signs of improvement, despite every medical effort being made on her behalf. Even in these final moments, those who were with her reported that she maintained the same strength of character and dignity that had defined her entire 7-decade reign. She faced her final battle with the same quiet courage that had seen her through world wars, political crises, and personal tragedies, putting on a brave face even as her body began to fail her. At exactly 3:10 p.m., Her Majesty's heart stopped beating, and Queen Elizabeth II was pronounced dead by Dr. Douglas Glass, the physician who had been overseeing her care in Scotland. Dr. Glass would later note on the death certificate that the cause of death was simply old age, a testament to the remarkable longevity of a woman who had lived through nearly a century of profound historical change. In subsequent interviews, Dr. Glass revealed that while the final decline was swift, he had actually anticipated this outcome for several months, having observed the gradual weakening that often precedes the end of a very long life. The moment of the Queen's death marked the immediate beginning of carefully orchestrated protocols that had been planned and refined for decades. Operation London Bridge, the comprehensive plan for handling the death of the monarch, was now in full effect, with its first phase, Operation Unicorn, specifically designed to manage the unique circumstances of the Queen dying in Scotland rather than in England. As the news of the Queen's death was confirmed, royal family members who had been racing to reach Balmoral began arriving at Aberdeen Airport and making the final journey to the castle. Prince William landed at 4:00 p.m., having made the difficult decision to leave Catherine and their 3 children at home, rather than risk traumatizing the young grandchildren with what was clearly going to be a devastating family moment. He was soon joined by Prince Andrew, Prince Edward, and Sophie, the Countess of Wessex, all of whom had traveled as quickly as possible once they received word of the crisis. Prince Harry's journey to Scotland was particularly poignant, as he had been attending the Well Child Charity Awards in London when the news broke. He immediately cancelled his plans and arranged emergency travel to Scotland, while Meghan remained at Frogmore Cottage in Windsor. The fact that Harry and Meghan had already been in the United Kingdom for pre-planned charity engagements seemed like a strange twist of fate, ensuring that even estranged family members could be present during this historic moment. However, despite the urgent travel arrangements, Harry did not arrive at Balmoral Castle until 7:52 p.m., well after his grandmother had already passed away. This timing would later become a source of some controversy and speculation, particularly regarding communication between different branches of the royal family during this critical period. There were initial reports of difficulty reaching Harry, though these were later clarified by palace officials who wanted to avoid any suggestion of deliberate exclusion during such a sensitive time. The careful choreography of announcing the Queen's death to the world was handled with the precision that royal protocol demands. No public announcement was made until every member of the royal family had been personally informed of the Queen's passing. This meant that for nearly 4 hours, one of the most significant news events in modern history remained known only to a small circle of family members, doctors, and senior palace officials. At 6:30 p.m., the official announcement was finally released to the world. The simple statement from Buckingham Palace read, "The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow." These few sentences would instantly transform not just the United Kingdom, but the entire Commonwealth realm, as Prince Charles automatically became King Charles III the moment his mother drew her last breath. Simultaneously with the public announcement, an enormous logistical operation swung into action. Palace staff worked frantically to contact all necessary individuals and institutions that needed to be informed immediately. This included the Chief of the Defense Staff, the High Commissioners of the 14 countries that still recognize the British monarch as their head of state, and urgent communications with prime ministers across the Commonwealth realms. Each of these notifications required careful handling to ensure that the news was delivered appropriately, and that constitutional continuity was maintained across all the Queen's realms. In a gesture that perfectly captured the gravity of the moment, Buckingham Palace lowered its flag to half-mast, a visual signal that would be replicated at government buildings, military installations, and public institutions across the United Kingdom and throughout the Commonwealth. This simple act of lowering flags served as an immediate and unmistakable announcement to anyone who understood royal protocol that the nation was now in mourning for its departed sovereign. The public reaction to the announcement was immediate and overwhelming. Outside Buckingham Palace, the crowd that had been maintaining a vigil throughout the day received the news with a mixture of stunned silence and open grief. Many people who had gathered hoping for positive news found themselves struggling to process the reality that Queen Elizabeth II, a constant presence in British life for over 70 years, was actually gone. Some were too shocked to speak, while others wept openly as the full impact of the loss began to sink in. For many Britons, this was truly the end of an era in the most literal sense. The vast majority of the population had never known a Briton without Queen Elizabeth II as their monarch. She had been a constant through decades of social change, political upheaval, and generational shifts. Her death represented not just the loss of a respected leader, but the end of a shared national experience that had defined British identity for multiple generations. As grief poured through the crowds gathered in London, people from across the city began making their way to Buckingham Palace in a spontaneous act of collective mourning. The scene outside the palace became a focal point for national grief, with thousands of people gathering to share in the collective experience of loss. In a touching display of respect and solidarity, London's black cab drivers formed an impromptu guard of honor along the Mall, keeping their lights on as a tribute to the departed Queen. The overwhelming sense of loss was palpable throughout the capital, but amid the sorrow, there was a moment of natural beauty that many interpreted as a sign of hope and continuity. That evening, two perfect rainbows appeared in the skies over London, one arching over Buckingham Palace and another over Windsor Castle. For many of those gathered in mourning, these rainbows served as a touching, if fleeting, symbol of resilience and the promise that life would continue even after such a profound loss. In a spontaneous show of unity that perfectly captured the mood of the moment, the crowd gathered outside Buckingham Palace began singing "God Save the Queen," the national anthem that had united the nation throughout the Queen's reign. This collective singing transformed what had been individual grief into a shared moment of tribute, an unspoken farewell to the monarch who had reigned for so long and had become such an integral part of the national identity. News organizations around the world immediately interrupted their regular programming to report the death of Queen Elizabeth II, recognizing it as one of the most significant news events of the year, if not the decade. The coverage was unprecedented in its scope and immediacy, with news anchors and correspondents struggling to find adequate words to convey the historical magnitude of what had just occurred. The mourning was truly global, with expressions of sympathy and respect pouring in from heads of state, religious leaders, and ordinary citizens from every corner of the world. The international reaction demonstrated just how far the Queen's influence had extended beyond the borders of the United Kingdom. Even in countries that had long since gained independence from British rule, there was genuine sadness at the loss of a figure who had been associated with dignity, stability, and grace on the world stage for longer than most people could remember. With the immediate shock of the announcement beginning to settle, attention turned to the complex process of honoring the Queen's memory and ensuring the smooth transition to the new reign of King Charles III. The death of a monarch who had served for over 70 years presented unique challenges in terms of ceremonial protocols, constitutional requirements, and the sheer logistical complexity of organizing events that would appropriately reflect the magnitude of her life and service. With Queen Elizabeth II's death confirmed and the initial shock beginning to settle across the nation and Commonwealth, the focus shifted to the monumental task of giving Britain's longest reigning monarch a farewell befitting her extraordinary 7 decades of service. The careful planning that had been in place for years, known as Operation London Bridge, now moved into its most complex phases, requiring the coordination of thousands of people across multiple organizations to create what would become one of the most watched and significant ceremonial events in modern history. The first major milestone in this process was the journey of the Queen's casket from Balmoral Castle, where she had spent her final days, to her ultimate resting place at Windsor Castle. This journey, designated as Operation Unicorn within the broader London Bridge protocols, began on September 11th at 10:46 a.m., when the Queen's casket left Balmoral for the final time. The casket was draped in the Scottish version of the Royal Standard of the United Kingdom, with a wreath of flowers placed on top, creating a dignified and solemn image that would be broadcast around the world. Princess Anne and her husband Sir Timothy Lawrence accompanied the casket on its 175-mile journey through the Scottish countryside, traveling through Aberdeenshire, Angus, Dundee, and beyond. The route had been carefully planned to allow as many people as possible to pay their respects, and massive crowds lined the entire path, many standing in silence for hours just to catch a final glimpse of their beloved monarch. The procession moved slowly and deliberately, allowing time for these impromptu gatherings of mourners who had come from across Scotland to witness this historic moment. After several hours of travel through the Scottish landscape, the procession arrived at the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh at 4:23 p.m., where the Queen's casket was temporarily placed in the throne room. This ancient palace, the official residence of the British monarch in Scotland, provided an appropriately regal setting for the Queen to lie in state before her journey south to London. The following day, September 12th, the casket was moved to St. Giles's Cathedral for a service of thanksgiving that honored the Queen's deep and lasting connection with Scotland, a country she had loved throughout her life. During the time the Queen lay in state at St. Giles's Cathedral, approximately 33,000 people filed past her casket to pay their respects. The queue moved continuously throughout the day and into the evening, with people waiting for hours in the Scottish weather for the opportunity to say goodbye to their queen. That evening, Princess Anne held a deeply personal vigil by her mother's side, standing guard in the ancient cathedral in a moment that perfectly captured both the intimate family grief and the public significance of the Queen's death. The next phase of the Queen's final journey required moving her casket from Scotland to London, a task accomplished using a Royal Air Force C-17 Globemaster aircraft. Upon arrival in London, the Scottish Royal Standard that had covered the casket was replaced with the standard English version of the Royal Standard, symbolically marking the transition from the Scottish phase of the funeral proceedings to the English ceremonies that would follow. The Queen's casket was then transported to Westminster Hall, where she would lie in state for 4 full days, allowing hundreds of thousands of people to pay their final respects. The procession from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Hall was marked by deeply solemn moments that resonated with centuries of British royal tradition. Big Ben tolled mournfully as the casket passed through the streets of London, while the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery fired ceremonial guns, creating an atmosphere of profound respect and historical continuity. Upon arrival at Westminster Hall, members of the three armed forces took over the ceremonial duties, with soldiers from the Queen's Company 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards being given the honor of placing the casket on the catafalque within the ancient hall. A service of reverence was held under the supervision of the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Dean of Westminster, with the royal family in attendance to mark this significant moment in the funeral proceedings. From September 14th to September 19th, Westminster Hall became the focal point for national and international mourning, as the Queen's casket remained there, under the constant watch of the Sovereign's bodyguard and the Household Division. The hall was open to the public around the clock, creating an unprecedented opportunity for ordinary citizens to participate directly in this historic moment. Over the course of those 4 days, approximately 250,000 mourners passed through Westminster Hall to pay their respects in person. The queue to see the Queen lying in state became a phenomenon in itself, stretching over 10 miles through the streets of London and requiring some people to wait up to 25 hours for their brief moment in the presence of their departed monarch. The queue was filled with people from all walks of life, from elderly individuals who remembered the Queen's coronation, to young children who had never known another sovereign. For those unable to make the journey to London, live streams were made available, allowing people from around the world to participate virtually in this historic vigil. On the evening of September 16th, King Charles III and his 3 siblings participated in a moving vigil at their mother's casket, standing guard in the ancient hall in a display of both personal grief and public duty. This was followed on September 17th by an even more poignant moment when the Queen's 8 grandchildren, including Prince William and Prince Harry, took their turn to honor their grandmother in a vigil that transcended the family tensions that had dominated headlines in recent years. The organization of the Queen's state funeral required an extraordinary level of coordination and planning. Fortunately, preparations for such an event had been carefully developed and regularly updated since the 1960s, with the Queen herself participating in many of the planning discussions over the decades. The responsibility for overseeing the funeral arrangements fell to the Earl Marshal, while the Foreign Office took charge of the complex task of sending invitations to approximately 500 foreign dignitaries and heads of state from around the world. Given the unprecedented nature of the guest list and the security requirements involved, the Foreign Office enlisted 300 staff members from their headquarters to ensure every detail was meticulously managed. The logistics of accommodating so many world leaders, from transportation to security to protocol requirements, represented one of the most complex diplomatic and ceremonial challenges in British history. The day of the funeral, September 19th, was declared a public holiday throughout the United Kingdom, with local banks and the London Stock Exchange closing to honor the occasion. The City of London underwent thorough preparations to accommodate the massive influx of mourners and visitors, including additional train services, extensive cleaning operations, and unprecedented security measures to ensure the safety of the millions of people expected to participate in or witness the ceremonies. On the morning of the funeral, the Queen's casket was transported from Westminster Hall to Westminster Abbey, where the service would take place. The procession was conducted using the state gun carriage of the Royal Navy, a tradition that connected this ceremony to the funerals of previous monarchs and other significant state occasions. As the procession moved through the streets of London, the tenor bell of Westminster Abbey tolled once every minute for 96 minutes, one toll for each year of the Queen's remarkably long life. The funeral service itself began at 11 a.m., with the Dean of Westminster, David Hoyle, leading the ceremony. The service followed the traditional format of the 1662 Book of Common Prayer, maintaining the religious and ceremonial traditions that had defined royal funerals for centuries. Prime Minister Liz Truss and Baroness Scotland, Secretary General of the Commonwealth, provided readings, while the Archbishop of Canterbury delivered the sermon that reflected on the Queen's life of service and dedication. The music selection for the service was carefully chosen to reflect significant moments in the Queen's life, including pieces that had been featured at her coronation and wedding decades earlier. As the service drew to its close, the last post was played, followed by a 2-minute silence that was observed not just by those present in Westminster Abbey, but by millions of people across the United Kingdom and around the world. The national anthem was then performed, concluding the formal funeral service with a poignant bagpipe rendition of "Sleep, Dearie, Sleep." Following the funeral service, the Queen's casket began its final journey to Windsor Castle, where she would be laid to rest. The procession from Westminster Abbey to Wellington Arch was conducted by the state gun carriage, drawn by 98 Royal Navy sailors, in a tradition that hadn't been employed since the funeral of Sir Winston Churchill in 1965. As the procession passed Queen Victoria Memorial, the soldiers paused to give a royal salute, adding another layer of historical significance to the proceedings. At Wellington Arch, the casket was transferred to the state hearse for the journey to Windsor, where another procession had already formed along Albert Road. The two processions combined to create a military escort of approximately 1,000 personnel, making their way to St. George's Chapel. Among the most touching moments of this final procession was the presence of the Queen's beloved animals, her fell pony Emma and her 2 corgis, Sandy and Muick, standing as silent witnesses to the historic farewell to their longtime companion. The committal service at St. George's Chapel in Windsor began at 4:00 p.m., with King Charles III and the royal family present for this more intimate ceremony. The Dean of Windsor read from Revelation 21, 1-7, the same verses that had been used at the funerals of the Queen's grandparents and her father, creating a sense of continuity with previous generations of the royal family. As the service neared its conclusion, the imperial state crown, the orb, and the scepter were removed from the Queen's casket and placed on the altar, symbolically marking the end of her earthly reign. In the service's most emotionally charged moment, King Charles III rose and placed the Queen's company camp, color of the Grenadier Guards, on the casket, while Lord Chamberlain broke his wand of office and placed it on the coffin as well. These actions formally signaled the end of the Queen's reign and the conclusion of the public portion of the funeral proceedings. The casket was then lowered into the royal vault, a moment watched by hundreds of millions of people around the world. However, this was not the Queen's final resting place. At 7:30 p.m., in a private ceremony attended only by her closest family members, Queen Elizabeth II was interred in the King George VI Memorial Chapel, alongside her father, King George VI, her mother, Queen Elizabeth, and her sister, Princess Margaret. Most significantly, she was finally reunited with her beloved husband, Prince Philip, whose remains had been moved from the royal vault to rest beside her for eternity. The Queen was laid to rest in a specially constructed coffin made of English oak and lined with lead for protection against moisture, a coffin that had been crafted more than 30 years before her death in anticipation of this moment. With her burial, Queen Elizabeth II's remarkable journey from a young princess who never expected to rule to Britain's longest reigning monarch had finally come to its peaceful conclusion. As the private burial ceremony concluded and the immediate funeral proceedings came to an end, the attention of the nation and the world began to turn toward the future and the beginning of the reign of King Charles III. The weight of following such an extraordinary monarch would be enormous, but the careful planning and execution of the Queen's funeral had demonstrated the enduring strength and continuity of the British monarchy, even in the face of such a monumental transition.